welcome Eric Anderson. Really appreciate you coming on the Geospatial Index as the Chief Technical Officer of Synmax. Perhaps we can get straight into it and hear the elevator pitch for Synmax.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Will. The elevator pitch is pretty quick. So essentially, we are a satellite intelligence data company. We are taking advantage of the large proliferation in the number of commercial satellites and requisite data that's coming down to Earth, and transforming that into SaaS products for companies and governments interested in solving a particular problem.
Yep. Okay. I think that was about an elevator ride's worth of pitching there.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on which floor you're going to, but I think that about works. And we can unpack that a bit more. There's definitely a lot to talk to there, but yeah, in terms of elevator pitch, I think that's about it.
Sure. I guess maybe a way into it is the niche that you either dominate or seek to dominate. Have you got any comments about that?
Sure. So I think our niche is one that was never intended to be. 5 to 10 years ago, back when a lot of the satellite companies that now have stuff in orbit today were looking to raise money, they were always saying, we're not going to be imagery companies, we're going to be data companies. We're not going to just sell pixels, we are going to sell solutions. And that's a very appealing pitch to investors, because then you get to control the most valuable part of the value chain, which is the end customer, right? The problem they ran into, in my opinion, is they discovered that rocket science is hard enough, and that data science is a specialty unto itself. So you've got a lot of companies now, and I believe Planet Labs is one of them that has kind of pivoted to a partner model, which is that they are selling the data, they are selling simple abstractions of the data, but they are relying on a growing ecosystem of companies like Synmax to try and pull the full value out of that data and sell it directly into particular industries. And that is the niche which I think we discovered on accident. My background is energy trading. And when I was a quantitative analyst at a natural gas hedge fund, I discovered that there was tremendous value to be pulled out of these satellite images in tracking oil and gas assets and using it to predict the future of energy markets. Once we discovered the niche existed there, we have just expanded from there and found an entire universe of possibilities.
Right. Okay. So I'm excited. The excitement's been building a bit over the past few interviews that I've done on the podcast, and it's all kind of been driven through Twitter. I guess I've gone on a few tracks with the podcast. For a while there, I was looking at generative AI because it was all the rage. We did Maps GPT. I'm in the UK, so a highlight really, and where it kind of ended on that track was Ordnance Survey, a company started in 1791. So that was an interesting contrast. But the latest track seems to be sort of starting from the fact that most of the Earth observation SPACs have essentially dropped, 80, 70%.
Yeah,
and
it's quite incredible. Yeah. Some even more than that, some of the 90s.
Right, yeah. So I guess you having a trading background, I can, I think we can share some excitement there, or at least understanding.
I'm not sure it's exciting, but it's definitely interesting.
Maybe especially if you're unfortunate enough to put your money down on some of them. But I guess what I'm trying to say is another part of the story is that, and how this podcast started was making an index of the world's public traded geospatial companies. And I'm up to 190 plus now, 27 odd exchanges last time I checked. Wow. And it's kind of a combination of this passion I have to do with equities analysis, only because that's what my training says I should do. I shouldn't dabble in trading. I should buy and hold forever equities. So I'm trying to combine this thing that I'm doing outside of work with, this profession I have as a geospatial consultant. And that's kind of led me in the direction of a new field called spatial finance. And then what started to emerge sort of organically, I wasn't intending to turn it into a spatial finance podcast, but in the last chat I had with Gabe from Umbra, we started talking about how, and he's in marketing, so of course he would say this, but I think it's true. A key to getting an edge in trading is geospatial analytics. And so I've talked with also Luke Fisher from Skyfi, and I think Synmax and Skyfi joined at the hip somehow. Maybe I can let you do some talking.
Yeah, us and Skyfi have a very close relationship. They're a partner company of us. We love working with them. We share a common origin story. Skyfi was actually originally an idea developed in Synmax, and we decided that it was deserving of its own company, and so they spun out, and they're now a separate entity from us, but we maintain a strong relationship and share a lot of common investors with each other. So I know Luke, great guy. I know a lot of people over at Skyfi, fantastic group. And I think what they're doing is very in keeping with our mission for Earth observation, which is, there is enormous potential, like you alluded to, not just in the trading world, but in a lot of different industries. But we need to, and this is a buzzword, democratize the imagery. I think that, the story I was telling earlier about these companies wanting to go completely to the end of the value chain has created an unintended consequence that they have not been as open and easy to get data out of as they probably should have, now that they're pivoting over to this new business model. That's part of the reason for the stock declines, is that transition is creating a lot of difficulty for the companies, as they now know that they need to rely on this other link in the chain, so to speak, right, in order to make their vision really come to fruition. And what Skyfi is doing, and what Synmax believes in as well, is that the imagery has been too difficult to get, and so the world has underappreciated its value. If it was as simple as going onto a website like you can on Skyfi and buying an image and downloading it and performing any types of analysis on it, we would see a lot more applications of it today than there currently are. So Synmax is working at it from the commercial SaaS side of it. Skyfi is working at it from the angle of, let's get this imagery into people's hands so they can discover cool uses for it.
So I guess you were talking about shared investors or co-founders, the origin team behind both Synmax and Skyfi. You said you're an energy trader. Are there any other vaguely well-known energy traders that are behind these two companies that listeners might like to know about?
Funny you bring that up. So Bill Perkins is president of both companies, and he's also the primary investor and primary owner of both companies. And it really was his vision that created both ideas, right? So when I was back at a natural gas hedge fund, I was a quantitative analyst for Bill. He is, I think most people would agree, the #1 natural gas trader in the world right now. His fund has generated incredible returns. And, I'm not saying anything secret here. You can look in the Wall Street Journal, right? This is very, very impressive what Skylar has achieved. And part of the reason for that is that, Bill is a visionary, and he can kind of see around those corners and understand what's coming next in the marketplace. And I think he's a very early adopter and a visionary in the Earth observation space. So, that's why he's identified those two opportunities / problems with EO. In that, we need more SaaS companies to kind of ferry this imagery into the hands of decision makers, right? Form it into products that people want, rather than delivering pixels, deliver answers. And then also, we need to just make satellite imagery more available. And, that became Synmax and Skyfi accordingly.
So I kind of got an inkling that the tide's turning a bit in geospatial and Earth observation when Luke Fisher said he'd come from Uber. And so I got the impression that what business people in the industry seem to be realizing is that they need to pull people from other industries where problems that occur at scale have been solved, and they can bring these people in to just start looking at the problems that the current batch of people that have been battling on in geospatial and Earth observation haven't been able to solve. Another inkling I got that there's a change that's happening in the industry is that charismatic, well-known visionary types like Bill Perkins are coming in and sensing the opportunity in what our industry has to offer, and are starting to assemble teams, I guess, around problems that he and organizations like that he runs needs solved so that they can get answers and generate an edge. So yeah, it's really exciting for me in this little podcast to start to connect the dots and move between these different organizations from, for example, Skyfire to Umbra, now to Synmax, talking with you. So I guess as an insider and someone with the background in finance and having passed the CFA exam, things like that, what does it feel like from the inside? Do you guys think that any meaningful progress has happened?
Yes, I do. I think, like I was saying earlier, the industry is transitioning from fully. It's ironic. You usually go the other way, right? You usually, take the segments and put them together into vertical integration for efficiencies. But this is splitting up, from companies that were aiming to be fully vertically integrated into companies that are more specialized. And I think that is a turning point for Earth observation. I agree with your assessment that the fact that people like Luke and Bill Perkins have pushed so many chips in to the industry, is an indicator of a turning point. And I think that we are likely to see this space mature a lot more, but it's going to take time, right? You were talking earlier about the unfortunate declines that we've seen in Earth observation companies, and that is just a reflection of the reality that what they're selling, there is unfortunately more supply than there is demand for right now. And the end consumer is uninterested really in where the data comes from. They just want the data to solve their problem. They want it to be accurate and they want it to be cost effective. And there are a lot of steps that have to occur between generating pixels on the ground and creating those solutions for those companies. And it is very complex and it requires industry expertise. I think one of the big biases that pretty much everybody has is they seem to think that everybody else's business is simpler than it actually is. As an outsider looking in, you can say, oh, insurance, that's simple, right? You collect premiums from customers and then you pay out whenever there's claims, right? Like, that's not a complicated business. We could totally do that. And I love that ambition. And I love the fact that people want to try and bring a new perspective to industries in order to disrupt and create additional value. But I think it also requires a degree of humility that is often missed, and appreciation for the nuances and complexities of particular interests. So something we do at Synmax is we hire directly in the industries that we are looking to build products for, rather than just pull in the standard myriad of ex-Google engineers who are great computer scientists and great AI engineers, and say, we're smarter than everybody else, therefore we're going to solve all your problems for you.
And I guess there might be a few more than usual of those getting around given the layoffs.
Unfortunately, yes. I never like seeing layoffs. I do feel like tech was in a bit of a bubble and there was an overbuild. It's always a sad thing when you see disruption like that and it's laying off. But this does provide additional talent on the market to potentially more useful uses.
You've begun to look at how you're working backwards from customer needs. So I remember when I chatted with Luke, he said he has his staff literally get out of the building. So what does working backwards from customer needs look like for Synmax?
Well,
in addition to hiring people from inside the industry. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And we've taken it one step further than Skyfire. We don't even have a building, so we are out. Yeah, we're we launched during COVID, and this is a little bit of an aside. I'll get to your question in a second.
Oh, good.
And the entire world was working remote, and it was working very well. I think the remote work experiment has proved that there is a lot of value, and letting people work from home, and that your employees can be trusted to get things done. In fact, in many cases, I think people are more productive working from home. So yeah, we never bothered to get an office. It's something that now that our team is growing and to the high 30s, low 40s, we're looking at doing. But it's always just going to be a place of occasional collaboration, not like a traditional office. So getting back to your question about how do we work backwards from customer needs? Well, like I was saying earlier, we hire directly into the industries, right? So we understand those needs very natively. I come from energy trading. A lot of the original founding members of Synmax come from energy trading, right? They came in from the hedge fund as well. And so we are intimately aware of the nuances of, the energy infrastructure and where the gaps are that can be filled, like an outsider may not be able to understand. And so it's much easier for us Having built up those decades of experience to know exactly where to point the satellite, so to speak, right, to extract the value. Whereas I think others have been a lot less successful because they haven't had that kind of insight. And then the same thing is true with maritime intelligence too. So our CEO, Brendan Moore, he is the former head of intelligence for the NCA, which for your listeners that are not familiar with the UK is the National Crime Agency, kind of the equivalent of the FBI for the UK. Extremely knowledgeable. He spent his career. Yeah, he spent
That's
his
quite
career.
a hire.
Yes, it is. We were extremely lucky to get him. And it's also another aside. It's also helped us discover that there is an enormous pool of talent in Europe that we didn't know existed before, because his network extends across Europe. And so, if I were doing this on my own, I would have, put out job ads around the U.S. and probably hired a bunch of people in Houston, Austin, San Diego, right? San Francisco. But it turns out there's a tremendous amount of tech talent that I think a lot of American companies may not recognize in Europe, and we have been very successful in making hires there. Anyways, getting back to it. So his expertise, right? He spent his career looking for dark vessels that were bringing drugs into the UK, and so he has an extreme knowledge set in this field that, again, lets us identify the gaps in where the existing surveillance technologies are and cater products directly to them.
Right. So this is another theme that's emerging. This whole, it's really interesting. My whole effort with this podcast, and I have to confess, an unsuccessful attempt to start a spatial networking event in London called London Map Up. But for the few people that did come, what you've just said about these dark vessels, that's another theme. So I think it's geolytics. They might be a Bristol geospatial firm. When I was in Bristol, I started Bristol Map Up there. Through that, I came across someone from geolytics. It seems like there's this like sub industry of trying to solve this problem
we hope it'll become more than a sub industry soon.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the dark vessel problem has been around for a long time, right? As long as shipping has been along, there's been a dark vessel problem. Just simple identification on the ocean is not as straightforward as I think people would expect it to be. And there have been a number of attempts to solve it, but my opinion is that the technology to do so on a commercial front has not been available until this recent proliferation of commercial satellites has come to fruition. Now that we have so many assets in space, which you can commercially task and download data from, like Umbra, like PlanetScope Constellation, it is now a solvable problem. That doesn't mean it's an easy problem, by the way, and perhaps that's why there's so many of these companies that are trying to crack that nut. And I think, Synmax, I can make the argument for why we believe we have found the unique approach that is going to do so. But because of this environment where there is such an obvious problem and there is a newly available set of tools to solve it, we're going to see a lot of companies emerging, hoping to do just that. And I think the pie is big enough that many of us, if not all of us, are likely to be successful.
Okay, so I'm going to try to contain my excitement and remain a vaguely productive host here, but I almost feel like there should be two episodes, one about your maritime products and one about I guess the fracking activity. What's the best way to bottom out each one? So I guess you started off with the energy trading problem, and I suppose one way to put it is increase the trade success rate or the expectancy value, if I'm using a correct technical term, for the energy trades of Bill Perkins. So was it opportunistic? Was it strategic? Why is there this second arm of the business about dark vessels, or are they somehow relevant to energy trading problems as well?
Yeah. So it actually came from Bill's humanitarian efforts. Bill is I'm talking about Bill Perkins. He's an extremely generous person. He is, I think per dollar of his wealth, more generous than anybody else. right? And he is very interested in particular in helping Africa. So he has a number of charitable efforts related to the various problems of Africa. And one of the biggest problems, especially in Western Africa, is illegal fishing. And Bill has wanted to try and help solve that problem as much as he can. But I think something that's unique about Bill is he doesn't just give money towards the problem, which he certainly does. He also wants to try and contribute his unique talents towards it. Great example of this, and another aside, is the Freedom on the Move effort that Bill did, where he took myself and other AI members of our team to try and help illuminate African American history from old newspaper ads. And so that was an example of Bill taking a specialty, something that he has, right? This data science AI ability to interpret text at a large scale and contributing it to uniquely solve a problem that he's interested in solving. And that same recipe is what brought us into dark shipping. So Bill's original intention with our maritime intelligence product, which is called Thea, was to try and identify the Chinese illegal fishing fleet. And for those that don't know, the Chinese illegal fishing fleet is not, a small operation of people in fishing boats going out without licenses and pulling out a few fish from the ocean. It is an armada of 27,000 vessels that are directly supported by the Chinese Communist Party with the state-sponsored goal of providing protein to China. And the way that they do that is they key in on countries where there are rich fishing resources, but there is not necessarily
with poor enforcement, infrastructure,
the enforcement
and technology
there in order to protect it. So they will go in and they will just go from Western African country to Western African country and just sweep. 27,000 vessels, just sweep the fish out of the water, right? So that was the birth of Thea, is what can we do to help solve this problem, right?
Okay.
Where does $1 go the furthest in stopping illegal fishing in Western Africa? Well, $1 can buy a tiny amount of gasoline, maybe, for an enforcement vehicle. $1 can buy one billionth of a boat, right? But where $1 goes the furthest, our belief, is in information. If you know exactly where the fishing fleet is in real time, all the time, then you can make whatever resources you have far more effective.
You can send their single Coast Guard vessel in pursuit of that. Right.
That's right.
Okay.
Ready with handcuffs.
All right. This is, it's wonderful to have an inspiring story on the podcast, and a humanitarian application of our profession too. At the same time or in the same breath as a genuine effort to gain an edge in energy trading.
Well, the problem extends so far, right? The problem is generally dark vessels, and it is a very, very broad problem. It's only one narrow scope of it that happens to be illegal fishing. Now, our path to discovering the problem, the broader problem, was through a humanitarian look at stopping illegal fishing. But once we discovered this larger problem, it only made sense that Synmax would pursue it because it helps both efforts. And that's, when we were lucky enough to get Brendan Moore to come in as CEO with all of his expertise, and he tapped into his network. And now we have this internal team of ex-military intelligence analysts who are trained. I swear to God, Will, you could look at a satellite photo for 45 minutes and not see what they see. They look at it, and in a second, they're like, oh, well, look, there's a missile launcher there, and there's this and there. I'm like, what? It looks like pixels to me. It looks like noise. It's incredible what the human mind can do when it's trained to do it. So we have an internal team of ex-military analysts that Brendan has brought in that have really allowed us to cut our learning edge, right? Talking about specialty. So our tech team is in there learning from our military intelligence team, and they're just coming in trying to automate as much of what that team can do as possible. Well, if it's possible for this human being to be able to spot this in this noisy pixelated picture, can we train a machine to do it? Of course. More often than not, the answer is yes.
Good. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just aware that I had a stupid grin on my face for half this interview. And it's just because, I'm sure, like everybody else in the geospatial, what you guys are doing is, really awesome.
Thank you.
It sounds like you should have had some success in working backwards from customer needs. So then how fast, at least ballpark wise, is customer growth?
So, on the Hyperion side, which is our frac crew tracking product, we have grown over 100% in the last 6 months in terms of customer acquisition. And this is a product that we only launched less than a year ago. I think we're just coming up on a year, right? So I don't want to disclose our financials, but we believe that product by itself could make us a profitable company, right? Despite the amount of money that we're pouring into the development of Thea. Now, Thea is a far less mature product, and it is a much larger technological undertaking. So we've spent a lot more time and money solving all those different problems, and Thea is just now getting ready for market. We're already in preliminary discussions with a number of different potential customers, ranging from traditional maritime intelligence companies to insurance companies to, of course, the U.S. government being, one of the big consumers for intelligence type products, no matter what they are. But I think that the path to getting a customer on the Thea side is a little bit longer because what we're creating is something completely new, right? It was both a bigger investment in solving those technical problems, but it's also, there is no template that currently exists to sell a product like ours. So we've kind of had to invent the market at the same time that we invented the product.
Which sounds like the definition of what Richard Koch in The Star Principle says you should do. It's best to invent and therefore more easily dominate a niche.
Yeah. I love the use of the word dominate. I should use that more in my lexicon. We're so focused in the forest on the individual trees of trying to solve these little problems. It'd be nice to stick our head out and talk about dominating the market that we're creating. But I think as we're successful, we do have expectations to dominate.
Yeah, I guess that reminds me of an interaction between my account on Twitter and I guess Synmax's, where there was a New York Times article about dark oil ships or oil tankers, I think from Iran, perhaps going to China or Russia. I can't remember which, maybe more like China. So given that they're transporting hydrocarbons and an untracked large injection of hydrocarbons into a market could presumably affect a price, it sounds like you could relatively easily pick up customers from, I don't know, everyone from S&P Global down to whatever the other companies are that try to price commodities like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And by the way, I read the New York Times article. It was wonderful. They did a great job. And I think they relied pretty heavily in that article on satellite imagery, which is exactly our thesis for how dark vessels get solved, is through the use of mass ingestion of satellite imagery. So I think they kind of proved that thesis and showed the world that yes, this is possible. Now, the difference between this article and what Synmax is doing is just the scale. The New York Times obviously threw a lot of human hours at it and a lot of research and had a lot of sources in order to piece together the story. Synmax is aiming to do that in a completely automated fashion, where we can track dark ships just like we can track light ships, right? And we could just look at a spreadsheet that says, here's all the vessels that left Iran and went to China, or left Russia and went to India, et cetera, et cetera. So getting onto your question, yes, this is one of the ways that we can extract value out of Thea, and it is one that we're actively pursuing. So we are currently in the middle of an acquisition of a company called Gas Vista. They are a New York-based company that has created a LNG tracking product called Leviathan. And LNG almost never goes dark because it has to come from and go to very expensive, well-regulated terminals, gas liquefaction and gas regasification.
Right, with
whereas
massive
oil,
compressor trains linked up to them. Yes.
Yes, it costs many billions of dollars to create and maintain. So there's not as much shady stuff going on in the LNG market, right? Whereas oil, you can literally take it off of a ship and put it into a truck, and and so the opportunity for oil to move around the world dark and go completely undetected is much, much higher, and it does. So our idea is we are going to begin marketing Leviathan to our existing base of gas customers, and we think that there's a natural overlap there. But we're also going to transform Leviathan into an oil tracking product and feed in all of our dark oil data from Thea, which would make us the only provider of dark oil information in the world to energy traders. And you're absolutely right that it is extremely material. Oil is more of a global commodity, right? Natural gas, it has the benefit of the benefit or the curse, right? At least from a trading perspective, of being really ring fenced because it's so hard to move around. You could be 3 feet from the wellhead, and if you don't have a pipeline attached to it, there's no way you're going to be able to bridge that 3 feet, right? It has to stay in a very specific, pressure tested pipeline, or it has to be liquefied and put on a ship anytime it moves around. So you can draw boxes around like the United States, for example, and say, here is a domestic natural gas market that, for all intents and purposes, can behave completely independently of the other natural gas markets around the world, right? And then just say, there is an outlet here for LNG, there is an outlet for exports to Mexico, there's an inlet for imports from Canada, but my analysis can put constraints on those inlets and outlets, and I can treat the market like it is in complete isolation otherwise. Right. Oil does not have that benefit. It's a global commodity. So when additional barrels get produced in Venezuela or Iran, which are all dark barrels, it is going to affect Brent. It's going to affect WTI. And so I think oil traders are hungry for this information because there's a lot of dark oil that moves around the ocean, a lot more than I think people realize.
Okay, sorry. So every answer seems to result in a whole bunch of new directions I want to go in. I was grinning before because, again, there's another theme that relates here. I basically started my geospatial career on the Gladstone liquid natural gas upstream project, which was doubling the size of a Santos gas field in Queensland, a state in northeastern Australia. And yeah, it was back in 2011, there was a race on essentially between 3 large international consortiums to be the first to build a compressor train to try to corner as much of the Japanese gas market as possible. Anyway, no, there's all sorts of parallels all the time with all of this. It's really exciting.
I'll tell you what the biggest connection is between energy and Earth observation. And it's the fact that energy is a widely distributed system, right? Yeah. There's no singular place that all the world's energy comes from. Like you said, a lot of it comes from Australia, a lot of it comes from the US, a lot of it comes from Venezuela, Iran, the Middle East, right? Like energy is all over the place. And so it makes Earth observation the perfect tool for analyzing it because it is so remote, there are no competing sensors for looking at it. Whereas Earth observation can cover enormous parts of the globe simultaneously.
Can I argue a little bit there?
Sure.
Would it be more productive to use the term Earth analysis? It sounds a bit kooky, but Earth analysis rather than Earth observation, because that gets to the point that I guess Will Cattle, the CEO of Spark Geo, made to return to my agenda. That really, and you made the point too, nobody gives a damn about the pixels and nobody really understands them. Very few, I don't think, really know how to analyze them. It's that people only really want to buy or put money down on the result of some analysis of what's coming down from all of these constellations. And the point of Synmax and the part of the market that you have cornered is based on your capacity.
I don't know cornered anything, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. At least in terms of your frac tracking side of the business.
We're the first ones in it, but I expect others are going to copy our success.
Right. But it's that you're better than others, or at least your average trader. You can give them the analysis that they need. I don't know where I was going with that question.
Well,
it's been a long day.
Yeah, no, I mean, you did make an interesting point earlier on, which is, people don't want the pixels, they want the analysis. And in large part, I agree with it. Although, to be completely fair, I want the pixels, right? So I can turn them into the analysis. The amount of people that want pixels is much smaller than the amount of people that want analysis. That's part of the reason for the underperformance in, you don't like the term, you like analysis, but Earth observation stocks, right?
Right, and that's the problem. They're all Earth observation stocks and not Earth analysis stocks.
Yes, they're all selling pixels. And, to their credit, I think Black Sky has done the most admirable job of any EO company I've seen of trying to get to that analytics point. And they've got a real innovative
there's some alpha.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not recommending stocks here. Don't rush off to your brokerage accounts, after hearing this podcast. I just noticed that Black Sky seems to be investing a lot in that, and they seem to have some success with it too. They've got a very impressive platform. But, I don't think that they will ever come close to capturing 100% of that, right? It requires too much specialty knowledge.
Okay. All right. So just to close off, I feel or to address a loose end with the dark fleets in this New York Times article. So you said that Synmax is moving towards a commercially viable product here. Do I recall correctly reading that you can offer at least thousands of square kilometers worth of detection of dark ships at once, or is it a global product? How much of the ocean can I subscribe to, basically, through you?
It is tens of millions of square kilometers a day. So we are the largest purchaser of over ocean imagery in the world, which in the commercial sense, because the ocean is 2/3 of the world, might make us the largest purchaser of pixels in the commercial world. Right now, you can subscribe to something in that neighborhood, tens of millions of square kilometers. Our goal in the next 24 months is the entire ocean, and we think it's possible. The constellations currently in orbit and the constellations planning to launch, which we are in active conversations with, I think are going to make over ocean pixel coverage daily possible.
That's incredible. So, I mean, again, there are so many questions. So what size of vessel?
Yeah, it depends on the resolution. So, the Planet Scope 5-meter constellation, we feel like we can perform accurate detection at 10 meters, and we can perform accurate attribution at 30 meters and above. So the distinction being that detection, we can say, yes, there is a ship there, right? But we don't know who it is. And attribution being there's a ship there and it's XYZ vessel.
Incredible. That implies that you're tracking it. Yeah.
That's just the PlanetScope constellation, right? Which is the primary tool in the toolbox right now. There's a lot of constellations going up with much better resolution. Like Satellogic, for example, they are aiming to do what Planet has done with PlanetScope, but at 1 meter resolution.
Intense. Okay. So
yeah, if you look at their
there's so much to track here. It's crazy.
Yeah, if you look at their investor presentation, they have spun up, or in the process of spinning up, I'll have to go back and check it, a facility that can create 120 satellites a year, right? So their intention, the implicit intention of that, is that they're going to launch 10 satellites a month in perpetuity.
Damn.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Wow.
And that's at 1 meter resolution. That's incredible. There's so many more, as resolution goes up, the applications scale exponentially.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a really exciting space. I can, profitably mine this as a podcast, I think, for the next few years.
And there's a lot of ancillary businesses that go into supporting that. One of the big ones is cloud computing. So as resolution goes up, the amount of computational power it takes to process that also goes up exponentially.
Okay, so I should
start tracking. I'm not going to tell you what my cloud bill is, but if this industry is growing, maybe the way to invest in it is to invest in
that's right,
cloud providers, not necessarily
picks and shovels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe because I have a number of sub-indexes that I've broken the whole geospatial index into, perhaps I can look at, because maybe there are some data center companies that are specializing in Earth observation data streams.
I'm not aware of anybody that is specializing just in Earth observation, but there are definitely companies paying attention to it. So Amazon has a space services portal, so AWS, right? And full disclosure, I'm not a part of it. I'm a part of Google Cloud, and my reasons are my reasons, right? It comes down to a big mosaic of different factors that we're all weighed against each other to decide which cloud we're going to operate on. But I think there are entities taking notice.
Again, so many different directions and things to chase, which is good. I feel like this is a productive exercise running this podcast. Well, okay. AI came up. Is it a fad, or is it actually meaningful for Synmax?
Which part?
Artificial intelligence, generative AI, generative geospatial. Is it all going to die down and be, I don't know, big data? What the hell are you talking about? That's still now we've passed on from that. Is it going to be like that, or is it actually going to be useful?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting dichotomy going on here. I think it is possible for it to both be extremely useful and revolutionary and also way overhyped. And the best analog I can think of is the 2000 dot-com bust, right? Where everybody knew the internet was going to be big. Everybody knew the internet was going to change. Well, almost everybody. I think Paul Krugman held out for way too long. But almost everybody knew the internet was going to absolutely change the world. That turned out to be completely correct. However, that did not make 2000s era .com stocks a good investment, right? And every investor should remember this and keep this in mind, right? Just because you believe you have the prescience to see that something is blowing up and becoming big does not mean that the available public equities are the best place to capitalize on that. And I think that's the situation we're in right now. I think valuations on AI buzzy companies are way too high. There is an excess of inflows going into them, and it is very likely a bubble. But at the same time, I believe that AI is an amazing tool, right? Synmax uses it all day, every day. We have what I believe are some of the best AI engineers in the world working for us. And we see the potential of the current technology, and we also see the trajectory of the technology getting better and better and further improving data analysis. So it is a little bit of a tale of two different pictures here, where I would, as an investor, be very, very careful about allocating dollars to that end. But as a chief technology officer, I'm extremely excited the potential of the tech.
Okay, so I mean, I guess it might be like asking Coke for their recipe. Maybe you won't want to disclose too much. But does Synmax see any value in GPT-4? Are you using other large language? Do you use large language models at all?
Every day.
Or is it? Okay, right.
I think that GPT models, and GPT-4 is a great example of it. Bard is also pretty damn impressive. I haven't decided which one's better. I subscribe to GPT-4, and Bard is completely free, and it does a really good job too. I think that these are tools of extreme leverage. I think that they turn an average programmer into an above average programmer, right? When used correctly, they can improve your efficiency and make you far better at your job. And so everybody at Synmax has a subscription to OpenAI, right? And we use these tools regularly, and we talk about in our daily stand-ups and weekly meetings about how we're using these tools and ways we found to improve our efficiency. So
okay, so for example, there's a Copilot.
Yeah. Copilot is one great way to use it. I haven't personally used it. A lot of our developers swear by it. And in our last all hands meeting, one of our developers gave a presentation on how he uses it. And after I heard that, I'm like, I got to check this out. I got to get the pie charm added. Yes, I'm CTO. I still love to code every now and then.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to know too.
I'll never give up that part of my job.
Sure. Right. Again, I feel like there's a whole podcast there, but we should move through at least to the final one, so we can at least say.
Gears, can I say one more thing about AI?
Yeah. Go for it.
I do not subscribe to the belief that AI is a job-stealing technology, right? I think this claim that technology is going to destroy jobs is an argument that has been made for over 100 years with every single step in technological development, right? All the way from when we were mostly an agricultural economy and farm machines, right? One farm machine can now do the job of 20 men, right? So, therefore, let's linearly extrapolate that, and the entire country is going to be out of work. Well, no, we just moved into the cities and we became more of an industrial economy, right? And then the improvements in industrialization said, okay, well, now we're going to replace all of these jobs, right? Nope, we just became more of a service economy, right? And then outsourcing, right? Said, no, we're going to replace all these jobs. Nope, we just high graded our service economy. So, that is a prediction which is too easy to fall into because it's a fragile logic chain. If this, then this, then this, then this, then this, then oh my God, look at that, right? And if any little piece of the logic chain falls apart along the way, then the entire argument falls apart. And
it's another way to look at it.
Something wrong.
Yeah, maybe another way to look at it is that new technology unleashes new demand.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I would also say that new technology simply creates leverage for human beings to do more. And there's no cap on GDP, right? There is no theoretical, there is no physical cap on what humans can achieve. So the only idea where AI would destroy jobs, right, is if we reach the absolute peak of human potential and AI surpasses it, and then humans have nothing left to do. And then you could have either a complete utopia or a complete dystopia.
Yeah.
Right. But I think we're really far away from that.
If I'm honest, I'm kind of inspired by the idea of, I'd like to think one of the most hardcore atheists out there, but at the same time, there's a little spark in me. I feel like it's, at the risk of sounding cringeworthy, there's something sacred about nurturing a new intelligence. And it's something to be proud of. I feel like it's a real achievement.
Yeah. And I think we could debate the semantics of whether or not it actually is intelligence or whether it's
right.
just,
absolutely. And I'm down for that debate.
Whatever, right? But I think that your heart, to use another spiritual analogy, is definitely in the right place in that you're feeling a sense of responsibility for what we're building.
Yeah, it's all about and for heaven's sake, like we're never going to send our carbon-based vessel that is the means by which our DNA propagates from one generation to the next. We're never going to send that out into space. We're going to have to
Such
find
an eloquent way to describe a human body, a carbon-based vessel which propagates DNA.
Well, basically, we're a gene replicator, right? We're a short-lived. What was the quote from Dawkins? A short-lived vessel for long-lived genes, or whatever the phrase was.
Oh yeah. I read Selfish Gene a while ago.
I forget what it was. But regardless, if an intelligence can be sustained using a different, I guess, different underlying machinery, in the end, it's the same.
Yeah, there's something sad about thinking that the only thing left of humanity will be, the machines that we create and continue propagating on. But I suppose that it comes down to the idea of quality being something innate. That I believe this personally, and I like to tell people who work for me about this that the quality that you put into something is something inseparable from yourself. When you create a brilliant piece of code, when you create a brilliant product, when you create something that is beautiful and the quality shines through, that is actually a manifestation of yourself.
Right.
Quality can be traced all the way back to its original owner. And so in that sense, the machine can be traced all the way back to humanity, and it would be a piece of humanity propagating forward.
If that is a way to somehow still make it okay that an intelligence at a broader scale might have emerged, maybe that's a good thing. Yeah, but again,
maybe we're getting into
long
science
day.
fiction here, which I love, but I'm afraid I haven't given much thought to a lot of this.
Yeah, I think I might need to have the necessary bandwidth to have a meaningful discussion about this. I think it might have to be at the beginning of the day rather than the end.
Yeah, when we're fully caffeinated.
Yeah, but no, I also really appreciate the fact that you have the time for this level of philosophy. And I think it is. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I like to read. I consider myself a voracious reader, and like I said, read Selfish Gene and read Zed and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And Person's Idea of Quality. And it doesn't necessarily contribute to my career in any way, but it doesn't have to. It's something special about being human, is having your own opinions about big ideas like this.
Maybe it's the only thing that will mean that one has a meaningful career, and that the business that you're engaged in will be a good one.
I think it's important to love what you do. I think it's.
I'm also meaning about ethics. Like, if you are proceeding without an awareness of philosophy and the deeper things, maybe you and the business that you're running will be more susceptible to doing the wrong thing, and not being capable of nurturing.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult road to trot, in my opinion, when you start mixing business and ethics, because you've got dual incentives.
Definitely at the risk of getting into preaching here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there is a tremendous risk that a lot of companies are pushing into, claiming to be completely ethical while also profitable, because not every situation allows you to optimize fully on those two variables. And my expectation is that entities that claim to optimize fully on ethics and profit are probably going to fully optimize on profit and then just justify the ethics. And that actually puts you in my view, a worse ethical position than if you had just focused on profit. I believe that there is a problem with companies trying to serve two masters that are actually serving themselves and just using the excuse that they are inherently ethical organizations as a means for committing worse atrocities. I think we are better off when we have well-defined roles for corporations and expectations. And we say, I understand that you have a perverse incentive towards profit, and that means I'm going to be all the more critical of you. And when companies come out and say, oh, I'm going to be a part of stakeholder capitalism, and I'm going to do good, what they're really saying is, I am above judgment. So don't look at everything that I'm doing, because here I'm pushing out some meaningless lip service towards, popular ideas.
Yeah, great. Very well put.
Path.
Yes, and I guess that's I feel I'm witnessing that in action. Anyway, all right, cool. So I think we've gathered enough ammunition to answer the final question. In the UK, it's possible to undertake a geospatial apprenticeship. So what qualities, skills, or ambitions should an apprentice have to do well at Synmax?
Yeah, I would say there are three qualities that are essential for succeeding at Synmax. The first one is honesty, because I cannot solve for a deficiency in honesty, right? Every other character component of an employee, I can solve for. If you're good at X, but you're bad at Y, then I'm going to put you on X. But honesty is something that cannot be fixed. So if you're dishonest, I can't find any place for you, right? The second one is you must be intellectually curious. Synmax does not have a carved in stone roadmap for the next 100 years. We expect that the best opportunities may emerge out of nothing. And so we need a team that is constantly curious and looking for them, right? And the final one is intellectual humility. Do not for a moment think that you're smarter than you actually are. It's fine to recognize your own achievement, but if you develop hubris, you also develop blinders. So I know that's really, really high level. You were like, look, dude, I was looking like you're good at Python. Like,
some of them have been about the tech stack. No, but that's great. These are really great themes for a youngster. Yeah, I especially appreciate the one about hubris. No,
it's a huge problem in energy trading. I'm sure all trading is.
You're right, and that's about behavioral finance. There was a whole previous podcast I ran with a colleague in Australia because we both did online investing course at Stanford together, and then we realized through that the only thing holding you back really, and Warren Buffett says it, I hate quoting Warren Buffett because everybody does, but managing your own hubris is your key to success. So yeah, appreciate you reflecting that theme as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of extremely smart people in energy trading, people 10 times smarter than me. And the most predictable factor to their downfall is their lack of humility. When they start believing the hot hand fallacy, that every idea that pops out of their head need not be scrutinized because they are just so brilliant, that they're pretty certain to have that bite them in the ass at some point in the future.
Honest, it's exciting for me just to be interviewing a CFA. And I don't want to put you on a pedestal, but
I didn't think that would come up.
I don't think I could ever survive that kind of an exam. So
I barely did. That was a hell of an exam. And if I could go back in time, I probably wouldn't do it all over again. Thank you for the compliment, by the way. But I don't feel like the CFA produced as much value in my career as I expected it to. And it's no fault of the CFA. I think it's just a fault of the changing financial industry.
Right.
When I was in college, long time ago, and I was studying finance, right? We studied all the principles of finance, but something we didn't study was programming, right? That was a different discipline. And now finance and programming are 100% intertwined with each other. Really, anybody wanting to get into finance should at least minor in computer science. So I have produced a lot more value for my career in finance alone, right? Not even talking about my current position in Earth observation, by improving my programming acumen than by getting a CFA, by far.
There you go. Well, there's a good tip for anybody in the finance world that is hopefully listening to this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just the data sets have grown so large, right? It used to be a running joke about the world financial system, relying on Microsoft Excel, and that was 100% true. But Microsoft Excel taps out at about a million rows, right? And these data sets that hedge funds are using now to analyze are in the hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of rows of data. There's just so much more data available. You must be proficient in a data science tool like Python or R or SQL, or preferably all three, in order to compete in that. It is merely a prerequisite.
Yeah, no, I can say the same goes for really geospatial and what's more becoming these days, spatial or geospatial data science. It's all kind of just data science with different facets these days, I feel. So yeah, when it's in that realm, it's R, SQL, and Python. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I'm happy to leave it there. I guess you've got other things to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah.
And you have a great rest of your day.
No, you too, Eric. Appreciate the contact.